Hey, what's up, comrades? After a couple weeks ago, we had The Last Kingdom, which is pretty long. We have a pretty short, lighthearted one here called Lionheart, which stars Leona, who is hot as shit. She's like a lioness, Nikke, but much like Biscuit or Nero, it's not even like a cat girl situation. She's just a cyborg who is hot and has the heart of a lion, which is kind of the point of Lionheart, the story. All right, so Leona is out with Timmy. Timmy is her white lion. We ran into her before in our reviews in Wordless. She helped Mihara communicate with Uni, right? Anyway, so as she's out with Timmy, just kind of walking around, people are getting like very concerned about having a lion in public. Later on, as we are trying to go to sleep, as usual, that's how a lot of these events begin. She shows up and she tells us that the shelter is shut down, which is no biggie because that happens from time to time. People get concerned and the government shuts it down so they can, like, I don't know, reevaluate something or whatever. The animals are all good. They're just hanging out in their in their catches in their cages. But Happy Zoo is going on a kind of like forced vacation, and they've never been on a vacation before apparently in like 100 years. Anyway, so they need someone to watch all the animals. And we think about it. We're like, oh, we know somebody. So we contact Guillotine after she leaves, and she's doing guillotine stuff with her like dark eye and big O and all that crazy nonsense. But she says, yeah, she'll come meet us at the shelter tomorrow. Apparently, she's very good with animals and everything. So the next day, we arrive early over at the shelter and we talk with the girls, Nero, Biscuit, and Leona. Apparently, oh yeah, I said that. 100 years. So Guillotine shows up in like her costume that you can purchase during this release of this event, which is completely ridiculous looking. Even for her, it's got like a top hat and stuff. Um, and then she immediately gets along with the animals, so the girls are like pretty excited about that. But they go back and forth and can't decide what they really want to do with their like free time vacation. So we're like, hey, we'll just take you to the mall. There's a whole bunch of stuff to do there. So we head over there, and they actually get pretty excited about being at the mall. There's like all sorts of fun things they can look at and get, like, I don't know, like sticks and cat toys and big clothes for like the big animals or whatever that Leona's getting. Um, they shop around for a bit, and we see that Leona is kind of acting a little weird. She's like paying for all this stuff, and she's getting like really extravagant gifts and all this thing. Um, and we end up paying for all the stuff, but then Leona wants to take us all out to eat. And so not only does she take us out to eat like a really fancy meal on like the Royal Road, but she also buys a whole bunch of food for the animals as well, which is kind of extravagant and whatnot. While we're there, we talk about Guillotine and how they feel like she is doing and how they have some concerns, but she seemed like she was kind of on top of her game. Afterwards, we go for a walk. Nero finally calls Leona out for acting kind of odd. She explains that she wanted to separate from the animals to see how they would do. As she talks about this, all the Happy Zoo girls decide that they really miss their animals and they want to head back. So when we get over there, it's pitch black. And then we fumble around and get the lights on, and the guillotine fills us in. Apparently, there are some protesters that showed up, something about dangerous animals being there or something. And so Guillotine did the right thing, and she just turned the lights off and then used her Kododoma, which is nonsense because she doesn't have that, to make them go away and to make the animals like go to sleep. And what it really was doing was just singing some songs, so that's nice. So they also got a notice which indicated that the closure, instead of being a couple days, is now going to extend throughout the week. The girls then thank Guillotine, who fades into the darkness and disappears. Biscuit and Nero go and check on the animals, and then we check in with Leona. She knew something like this would occur eventually, and we ask her to help. And she says, yeah, definitely, but I need some time to think. After checking on the animals, Leona meets up with Biscuit and Nero. They talk about how the animals are asleep and how Guillotine actually did a fantastic job. Leona then tells them that they need to pack. With the shelter closed for a week, the big animals need to go to the surface. They need to run around. They can't just stay in cages. Like the dogs and the cats, they're going to be okay, but the bigger animals need like some space. And then Nero decides that she's going to stay and watch the shelter, but that Biscuit can go up and help Leona with all that stuff. And also, she's going to ask us for help, obviously. So we discuss the plan with them, and then we head over to Mustang to get approval, right? Because we can't just go on missions up to the surface by ourselves. We got to get a permission from like a CEO or from the government or something like that. And so we talked to Mustang, who I love. Every time he shows up, he's the best. We talked to him about the plan, and at first he's like, "None." We talked some more. Apparently, the shelter is like a joint operation between this animal rights organization and Tetra, and so he has to get permission for them too. Also, he talks about how the shutdown of the shelter was partially to like give the girls a break, so it's like kind of on him for that aspect of it. We talk about how the big animals need some space to flourish and how Leona is leading it. And he mentions her having the heart of a lion, obviously, because that's the name of the event. And then he finally kind of like sways and he's like, all right, I'll talk to the organization and see about getting that going on. And so finally we get permission to take the girls, Biscuit and Leona, along with the animals up to the surface. The next day we meet up, and then we meet a few of the different animals. We meet Ruby, who's an eagle that we are kind of like responsible for. We also meet Gray, who is a wolf that was raised by dogs, and so Biscuit and her or him get along pretty well. Let's see. Okay, so we head up to the surface, and then there's like various other like large animals. And as soon as we get there, Ruby like takes off, and we're like, "Hey, come back here!" And we like blow this whistle that Leona gave to us, and she's like, "Don't worry about it. It'll be fine." All the other animals also take off, and they're just like playing around, enjoying themselves and everything. We sit in a bit back and just kind of watch, and we talk about Ruby a little bit. Leona mentions that she's blind. That when she found her, she because she was blind, she was going to die. That she took her in. And that later on, when Leona was on the surface looking for animals that needed rescue, she was attacked by Ruby's family, but that she was able to talk to them and get them to understand that like she was rescuing Ruby and that she'll be okay. And so apparently Ruby's family then set up their nests all in these trees right by this elevator that is kind of set up for Happy Zoo to get animals up and down more easily. And so Ruby's probably super excited to go and spend time with her family. We have a discussion about whether she's going to come back or not. And Leona's convinced that we don't need to worry about it, right? That she has a backup plan. She then heads off to set up decoys so that we can kind of like camp out for the night and have a good time. A little bit later, Gray comes over and wants to play catch with Biscuit. So she does. And at that point, Leona returns and she's like, kawaii, they're so cute together. A bit later, a lot of the animals return for food, all of them except Timmy. Biscuit gets a little concerned. Then Leona gets concerned. And then Timmy like wanders back over. He's sad because he got lost. Wah, wah, wah. Anyway, and he didn't get any food either. And they kind of talk about how he's an apex predator, and Leona had a lot more expectations for him because he should have been able to like find food, but he didn't. Anyway, so after we feed all the animals, it's time for rest. So we lay down to rest, and we can't sleep. So we get up and we go for a walk. We find Biscuit and Leona, who are also not able to sleep, and we all talk about the animals and wanting to return to the Ark and all this stuff. Also about Ruby and her family some more. Biscuit is concerned that Ruby will not want to return, and Leona is like, yeah, I'm not worried about it. And eventually we fall asleep. Early the next morning, we wake up and we find Biscuit lying next to us and no Leona and no other animals. So we start to freak out. Something might have happened to the animals. Something might have happened to Leona. There's raptors up here, yada, yada. So we follow the animal tracks and find Leona with all the animals. She's telling them that they're free to go and that they can run. And she gives this pretty great speech about freedom and about living their lives and enjoying themselves and being safe. And even though it's, they're not used to being wild animals, that they should be okay. And then they all kind of like run off. We watch for a moment, and this includes Timmy. She takes off like his collar and gives him a hug, and he takes off. We stand with her for a little bit, watch the animals run free, and then we head back over to Biscuit. Biscuit is super confused, that sweet summer child, about that's going on. Leona fills her in, and then Biscuit's like, but wait, even Timmy? Timmy and you are like best friends forever. And Leona's like, yep, Timmy, when I said he could go, he took off. And Biscuit like looks past Leona and she's like, are you sure about that? Because Timmy's right there. Oh no, he came back because he wants to stay with Leona no matter what. And, they stay best friends forever. And you get a cute little like shot, or they get these little like kind of, not gifs per se, but these little like animated visuals where Leona and Timmy are like hugging and she's saying how much she loves him and how much he means to her. And he's crying and she's crying and it's super precious. Also, then it's super hot in this clip. But anyway, we head back to the shelter. And once we return, Nero's like, what's up? And Biscuit's like, we let all the animals go. And Nero's like, yeah, of course you did. That's the whole point of going up there, wasn't it? And then Biscuit's like, yeah, obviously. And then they talk about, Leona's like apologizes and says she'll take all the badness that comes from that or whatever. And the girls are like, no, you're our squad leader. We trust you. We love you. We support you fully. because friendship is magic. And they talk about enjoying each other's company and how they've had a good time with this vacation and how they're all going to work together to take care of the rest of the animals and everything. And everyone's happy. And that is like kind of wraps up that. And then we get the kind of epilogue. And the epilogue is later on, Leona is meeting with Mustang. He asks her about releasing the animals. And he then mentions that the animal rights organization was apparently behind the closure and all the protests and stuff because they were trying to create a situation where they could come steal the animals. And that night, the protesters that came while Guillotine was watching over the place, they were actually not protesters. They were members of this organization. Kind of like PETA. They were probably going to steal the animals and kill them for absolutely no reason. They're assholes. So thank goodness Guillotine was there. He also mentions that, so he's like, so what's the deal with the animals? And Leona's like, well, I got them all tracked and tagged, tagged and tracked so that I can keep kind of like a base with them so that nothing bad happens. And then we can, keep monitoring them and all that stuff. And he's like, good. But you still stole ARC property, so you must be punished. So your license to care for animals is being taken away. And there's like a pause. And Leona's like, I can just take a test to get that license back. And he's like, yes, you can. She's like, that's not much of a punishment. And he's like, that is also correct. I love Mustang so much. And anyway. He's like, your true punishment is the fact that you had to put all the big animals away and send them off on their own. So, you're just going to be helping out with cats and dogs and Timmy, obviously. And so that's not enough of a punishment for what you did. And she tears up and is like, thank you, Mustang. And he's like, non my sherry, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, also all those PETA agitators, they will be punished because I am Mustang. And I have a super dark past. And if you know Mustang's going to punish somebody, they're going to get fucking punished. But that wraps up the Bod story, which was delightful. Next up, we have just Leona. We've already done Nero, we've already done Biscuit, and Guillotine. So these, like I said, these stories are going to start being a little bit shorter unless they're like main events, like anniversary events where there's like so much stuff going on. Or introduces like multiple brand new characters. But for now, we just have Leona. Leona calls us to the shelter to check on Timmy, who's acting kind of strange. Biscuit meets up with us when we get there, and we follow her to see that Timmy is acting very despondent towards Leona. And we admit we're like, I don't know how we can help. We're not really like familiar with the whole lion thing. And Leona says, I just want you to observe as a third party to see like what you notice. And first thing we see is that he doesn't want to eat. He doesn't want to go for a walk. Biscuit comes in with some of the dogs to take for a walk, and Timmy like kind of sexually assaults them. And we're like, oh, he's in heat. So it's clearly not getting his urges satisfied. So the three of us, Biscuit, Leona, and I, we discuss how the animals in the shelter are sprayed and neutered, but that Leona is in charge of the more exotic animals and the big animals, and they are not. So they can keep breeding. So they can kind of like an ark, like a Noah's Ark kind of situation. So we think about what we can do in this situation. They both turn to us as a male and ask what should be done, and we say, well, he needs to go mate. Of course, that's how you deal with this. Unfortunately, there's no lionesses in the ark, so we have to go to the surface. Selena mentions that Biscuit should stay behind as the more individuals around might impede our search for lions and lionesses. So we pack up and head out with Leona and Timmy. On the surface, Timmy finds their lions pretty quick, but the first day he gets rejected 3 times. Wah wah. Like one lion, Chica just absolutely is like, no, good, I'm good. And then the other 2 have mates already, and he's not more powerful to like dominate over them. So we set up camp after the first day, and we'll try again tomorrow. Leona is kind of concerned that tomorrow will be equally unfruitful, but we're confident that Timmy can, surge his manhood and do a great job. So we're out there for a little bit. Still no luck after a few days. And the most difficult aspect is that the other lionesses tend to already have mates. So we discussed this with we discussed this with Timmy. Well, Leona discusses this while we stand around, and he decides he wants to try to go it alone, to kind of be out of our line of sight, right? So he takes off, and by nightfall he hasn't returned, which is no big deal because he's a lion and he'll be fine. At that point, Leona's like getting all cuddly and horny and stuff, and she starts talking about mating and how peak maleness and how the commander is like such a manly man and all this stuff. And then she gets super embarrassed and chickens out. A few days later, Timmy has not returned. Our food supply is starting to run low, and so we're going to have to return to the Ark soon. And so Leona whistles for Timmy, who looks majestic when he shows up because he definitely fucks some other lions. And we're like fist bump, bro. And then we should have done the same thing to Leona, but it didn't work out, and we're kind of pushed out. She kind of pushed out. We're like the ultimate consent guy in this game. So if the chicks don't want it like 100%, we're like, nah, it's good. We'll wait. I mean, you have like a harem of like 150 sexy cyborgs. So it's like, I can wait. There's plenty of other options. Especially when you got chicks like Maiden Isabel around. So we camp out for like the last night right by the elevator before we're going to head back in. And Leona's like, hey, Timmy, how about you go find other Landis to bang? And he's like, wink, wink, got it. So he takes off. And then she's like, hey, let's fuck. And so we do. This is after she goes on a rant about mating and lionesses and lions and how they're not monogamous and how strong male, it's another one of these things. It's great. As she's talking about that, she gets closer and closer. And then eventually she's like, so, and like opening up her like flowered insides. And we're like, all right. And then we do it. And not only we do it all night because it's literally like, all right, we accept. And then like, as dawn approaches, it's like, what? They're still involved in like the mating dance or whatever, which is excellent because again, she's super hot, so that's great. A few days later, after we've returned to the Ark, Timmy is acting normally again. We go to visit the shelter, and after checking in with him, Leona mentions that maybe we got to visit the surface again so we can take care of our quote unquote animal instincts, and high fives all around. But that's Leona's Bond story and this video. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and we'll catch you guys later. Bye.